Now there's some neat little facts here that you can that are very helpful to you. Um, you'll notice that when it talks about the beasts, which is the fifth plague, the plague of rain on the beasts, it really focuses on the cattle, the calves, because as we know, the golden calf is going to come later. The calf, since you're dealing with an agricultural society, the idea of an ox is actually like your prized possession because that's how you make all kinds of money on your farm with all the strength from the ox. But the idea here is that the plague, when it talks about the plague being a rain on the beasts, of course, the children of Israel, the animals in Goshen are separate from the beasts of Egypt, but it really focuses or says specifically about the calf or the oxen, which I think is obviously a forerunner of what's coming. The children of Israel don't get this and they start worshiping the golden calf later. There's a connection there. But the next one is what's really interesting to me is that, of course, the sixth plague is the plague on. You're muted, Lori. So,
Boils,
so they're a plague on who?
Man.
people.
On man. So again, the number six is connected to man, right? Just like the sixth day of creation is connected to man, the sixth plague is connected to man. And so the number six, again, connected to man, which again is going to be a precursor for us when we try to understand the 666 later in Revelation. It'll help us understand six is connected to man because it's man's number, right? And then, of course, we have the interesting seventh plague. And something interesting is said about the seventh plague that should catch our attention. What does he say about the seventh plague that makes it kind of odd?
It's something that hasn't been since the foundation thereof, even till now.
Thunder.
Yeah, that's right.
There was
But what else
thunder.
does he say? Look at verse um
Thunder.
verse
Hail.
chapter 9, verse 13. He says, the Lord says to Moses, rise up early in the morning. Of course, we know, stand before Pharaoh. This is going to happen at the water, even though it doesn't say, we know it's at the river. And say to him, thus saith the Lord God of Hebrews, let my people go, that they may serve me. She says, for at this time I will send all my plagues upon your heart and upon your servants and upon your people, that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. So it's very interesting that he says, at this time I will send all my plagues. So the seventh plague is actually a, a symbol or a summarization of all the plagues at once, which is very interesting. So there's, again, when God says something and it doesn't make sense to our mind, it means he's telling us something. There's something deeper there that we need to understand. And what's interesting about this plague, so the plague of hail, which is the seventh plague, seven is a number of completion. He says here that this I will send all my plagues. So the seventh plague is actually a plague of completion, the completion of the process. And
Mm,
he talks about hail. It's hail and it's also fire,
yes.
which is very interesting. So what kind of hail is this? Well, so remember the third angel's message, right?
Fire and
What does the
brimstone.
third angel's message tell us?
It's going to rain fire and brimstone from heaven.
Yes, that they'll be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. So I know many times in our thinking we think of hail as as water, as ice, and it may be, or that may be part of it. But in Sodom and Gomorrah, something else comes down on them, right?
Yeah.
So the point that I'm interested about is that the idea that the third angel's message connects this idea of fire and brimstone as the presence of the holy angels and the presence of the Lamb, which I find is very interesting, which means that the fullness, if this is the fullness of the plague, according to what God said, then God's presence has to be here.
Mm.
It's the same idea again that I see with with, as I said, the third angel's message. The same thing that happens, by the way, with Sodom and Gomorrah.
It also parallels the seventh
And I
last plague
think
in Revelation 16.
that's right.
They're bringing it to completion with the presence of the Lamb.
Right. Which means that, again, the three plagues, the locust, the darkness, and the plague of the firstborn are are a separate and distinct process. Something's happening here, separate and distinct from the seventh plague. By the way, Revelation does the same thing. You'll notice that the fifth trumpet, there's the darkness, the locust, the darkness, and the plague of the firstborn are described as in one trumpet, when the other process of coming out of Egypt is described earlier. So there's something here that I'm saying that needs to be understood, something that needs to be dug into a little bit further. There's more here than meets the eye, because otherwise it makes no sense. You wouldn't say if there's 10 plagues that the seventh plague is the fullness or the completion of all the plagues if there's 3 more plagues to come. So again, I see the same thing I saw with the children of Israel, that God, the first 3 signs are repeated in the first 3 plagues. And then, of course, you have Passover, which is the 7th plague for Israel. So there's a repetition of the pattern. I think God is doing the same thing in his mercy to Egypt, is that he's given the fullness of his plagues and showing them. And then there's the last 3 are the final 3 angels' messages, or the final invitation of mercy that he's going to give before probation closes. That I see a God that doesn't want to give up on loving these people and give them an offer of life,
It's like in Revelation
which is
14.
amazing to me, because every time everybody explained the plagues before this, that they showed me this God that was so quick to cut people off and not give them another chance. And I see the total opposite going on here. Go ahead, Craig.
Sorry. That's like in Revelation 14, you get the 3 angels' messages and then the king on the throne, and then they repeat.
Then the repetition. That's right.
Yes.
That's
And
right.
the maturity is in the midst, but there's a repetition
That's
at the
right.
end, which is connected to
So
the judgment of the living.
God shines
Actually.
light. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that I'm seeing here.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
interesting.
saying. I'm seeing the same pattern in the plagues of Egypt that I'm seeing in Revelation, which
Yes.
to me, that means that Revelation, by the time we get to Revelation, it shouldn't be such a mystery to us. So then we have locusts, and then we have the darkness, and then we have the plague of the firstborn. It's very interesting that the locusts, again, are connected to the wind. The east wind brings the
Yes.
locusts out of the
Yes.
Red Sea. So the locusts are connected to the Red Sea. The east wind brings the locusts, and then it's the west wind that takes the locusts and takes them back to the Red Sea. So that's very interesting. Since you said the Sabbath school lesson this week is talking about the parting of the Red Sea.
Yes.
It's very interesting. And then, of course, the plague of darkness. It's darkness on one side, but it's light on the other side, in land of Goshen. And what does that remind you of?
That's the Red Sea experience too.
Red Sea
Yes.
experience
Yeah,
too.
pillar
Yeah.
It was dark to the Egyptians, but light to the
Yeah. So interesting. We're having the repetition
Yeah.
of the pattern again. And
Yeah.
we don't tend to think of the Red Sea as a plague, do we?
right,
No.
But actually it is, right?
right.
Because it's a sign. It's a sign between God and Moses and between Pharaoh about who's God and who isn't God, right?
Hmm.
And of course, we're not studying the Red Sea, but how many chariots of Pharaoh were there?
600.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
So we have this number 6 connected. Oh, well, yeah. All right. So, yeah, so there's something again, God is demonstrating something in a repetitive pattern that we should catch. That God is trying to tell us something. And again, since God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, the same way he dealt with the children of Israel and with Egypt, it's the same thing that's going on in Revelation, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yes. And then, of course, the last plague, which is the close of probation, we call the last plague, is actually Passover,
Hmm.
right? But when you look at Passover in terms of kingship, then there's something that's very interesting. There's some interesting aspects of this that happen that are very insightful, right? Because in kingdom thinking, kingdom dynamics, the idea to pass over means that you're passing over, you're leaving one kingdom and you're going into another kingdom. All right. But the truth is to pass over, you can't just pass from one kingdom to another kingdom, that there's a cost involved. This idea of paying a price or paying a cost. So remember, when the children of Israel leave Egypt, they were to do something with the Egyptians.
Take the silver and gold earrings,
Yes, they would go to their neighbors and ask for
spoiled
the
them.
silver and gold. And why would their neighbors give them silver and gold?
It was almost like a reparation for their slavery.
Well, no, it's not. No. That yeah, good. That's a good modern answer. When you at the Feast of Tabernacles, when you go up to worship the King, what do you bring with you?
Yeah.
Right.
Gifts.
You bring gold because you have to pay tribute. Remember the other 666 in the Bible besides Revelation 13 was the amount of gold that was paid to Solomon as tribute. Why are they paying Solomon gold in tribute? Well, because
They conquered.
by paying tribute, they're actually acknowledging him as their king. And you pay tribute to live in the king's domain and under the king's laws and have the privilege to live in his kingdom and live in the light of his kingdom and all the blessings that come from his kingdom, then you're supposed to pay tribute. And by the way, you paid the tribute every year. You'd go up to worship the king and you would pay tribute. So, and by the way, the idea of paying tribute from God's perspective is what? Why do you pay tithe? When you go to God's house, do you bring tribute?
You're returning a portion of what is his anyways.
Okay, so you're acknowledging what?
Yeah, everything comes from him.
Everything comes from him. It's rightfully his, right? So that this is the same idea when you pass over or you pass from one domain to another domain, you're supposed to bring tribute. Because you're acknowledging that you're acknowledging the king that you're worshiping is the source of all life. So when the when the children of Israel are getting gold and silver from the Egyptians, the Egyptians are willing to give the gold. Why? Well, they're afraid of the plagues. No, they're acknowledging that God is actually the source of life. They're paying tribute. They're paying tribute to the king. And the whole idea of passing over is connected to the tribute. Even in Greek mythology, remember when when someone died, they put a gold coin over their eye.
Yeah.
Why did they do that?
To pay the Chiron to take them over to the other side.
Right, to pay the tribute to pass over from one domain to another domain.
Yeah.
Yes, that idea is an ancient idea, and it actually comes from God. Of course, the truth is about our God is who's the one that pays the tribute.
He does.
Yes, because actually the blood on the doorpost is the payment to pass over from death to life. Now, in the worldly kingdoms, the king doesn't give his life to save slaves, but in God's kingdom, what happens? Who's the one that sheds his blood so that the slave can pass over from death to life?
Jesus.
Who paid the price of your salvation? Right? So this Passover, again, God takes this ancient imagery and then he flips it right side up so we can actually see what the imagery truly meant before it got twisted by selfish worldly kings who were exploiting other people is actually a picture of this divine king who's laying down his life to save people, right? So this idea of paying tribute and passing over, and that's why the blood is on the doorpost, because the doorpost is a threshold between the two domains. Inside the domain, on one side of the door is one domain, and outside of the door is another domain. And so you're actually passing from one domain to another domain. And that's what's happening at Passover. Actually, we say that the angel of death passed over, but in actuality, what really happens is that the blood allows the angel of life to enter in, right? No, it's the same thing, only you're looking at it from the perspective is based on one's relationship to the angel. If I'm in Egypt and clinging to my sin, then that's an angel of death. But if I'm under the blood of the covenant, then that's an angel of life. And that blood allows him to come in and give me life. So again, our perspective of the plague depends upon our relationship to God, right? Because to God's people, the plagues are actually a sign that the old world that enslaved us is dying, and that God is actually coming to restore or help us pass from death to life so we can have freedom, and then we're going to have life. It's actually the beginning of the process of recreation, which is why, again, it's connected to the Feast of Tabernacles. Does that make sense? So the process of recreation actually begins before the second coming happens. I know some of these things sound like heresy, but the process of God restoring us or recreating us actually it comes to completion at the second coming. That's where we receive new bodies. But the process of receiving a new mind and new will actually happens in this process of God when he breaks the mindset, our old mindset of the things of this world, and he breaks our will is set free from from the addictions and the habits of these things of this world. He gives us a new mind and he gives us a new will. That's the beginning of the recreation process. But at the second coming, when he gives us new bodies, then we have new minds and new bodies, new minds and new wills to go in those new bodies.
3, this completion.
Yes. Is what I'm saying making sense, or is it just craziness?
We like your kind of crazy.
My goodness, if it sounded crazy the way the rest of the world is, you'd just be normal.
Yeah, right.
So by the time the children of Israel get to Sinai, they were supposed to have understood what God was showing them, because he was speaking to them in language that they understood. But they still, in their hearts, they hadn't left Egypt. They still make this golden calf, right? So they're still a slave in their minds, and their hearts are still a slave to Egypt. Even after all the signs and wonders that God did to show them that he was God and that he could set them free, they were still slaves, which it's a whole nother story. And then, of course, that brings the whole Revelation 13 story up again in terms of worshiping the beast and his image instead of going up the mountain to encounter God.
Well, it's a whole lot easier to leave a physical place than it is to get the mindset out of you. And it is.
Yeah. Well, there's a zinger there, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a zinger for us, because we many times when life gets tough, we leave. We think if we go to a different place, it'll get better. Well, and the problem is no, because wherever I go, there I am. I'm bringing the beast with me when I go. The problem isn't outside of me. The problem's inside me. So no matter where I run, how do I run? When I try to run away from my problems, I always bring my problems with me.
Well, I think about it because I grew up in the world for 40 some odd years before I came into the church. And I didn't know anything about King of the South or King of the North or any of that stuff. And then as I've been learning, I'm like, oh crap, I think like that too. It's all in me. I learned all that stuff. Now I got to unlearn it all.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. Amen.
Sometimes I think I spend
And sometimes it takes the same, the other 40 years in the wilderness
Yep.
to undo the 40 years of things we learned when we were in Egypt.
And how many years are we going to spend in heaven on learning stuff?
But God's patient with us, isn't he?
Good thing.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's interesting is when we try to understand the plagues of Revelation, if we look at them through the eyes of Egypt, then we'll better understand the principle behind it. And I'm not saying this, I'm not trying to spiritualizing away the plagues, saying there's not any physical, there's not any physical plague connected to the plagues of Revelation, that it's just spiritual. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the principle that God is explaining or making clear, um, that he does what he did to the Egyptians is the same thing that he's going to be doing in the last days with us and with the people that are left on this earth. And whatever literal form that plague needs to take place to prove the point is going to, but if we understand our principle, we'll see it. So for example, you could even talk about the COVID crisis as a plague, and it reveals a principle. It reveals the principles by which we function. And that's the whole idea of a plague or a calamity, is that it actually exposes the principles, the principles by which we function, the way we think, or that which those parts of reality that we rely on as our God to maintain order.
Well, I saw an awful lot of
And
stuff
God is
and people willing to destroy people that didn't see things their way, and no one was willing to allow others free choice.
right. So instead of looking inside and seeing my own issues, I'm busy trying to run other people's lives. Well, then obviously that's part of what God is trying to show us. Also, this idea of liberty of conscience, was the principle that was so obvious to many Christians, but somehow, we missed it.
Hmm.
So what I'm saying is that the plagues may come in a form that we're not familiar with until we actually sit and prayerfully reason it through. So the
Yeah.
idea is that when Jesus comes, the second coming, the
Yeah.
waters are all Satan's waters are dried up.
Okay.
All his people die at the second coming,
Yes.
right? But then after the 1,000 years, there's a resurrection. So
Yeah.
and then Satan has to redeceive the people again, and he's going to redeceive them, the people to attack the city. So it's the same idea that we were saying with the sixth plague. There's a drying up of the waters, and then Satan has to go out. The frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, and he has to redeceive the people. Well, it's the same idea that you're talking about, and that's why the idea of the seventh is the fullness of the plagues. And Pharaoh is saying, "I and my people we've sinned. We're all wrong." That's a drying up of the waters. But so
Yeah.
then there has to be a redeception of the people. That's why they're connected. The locust and the darkness and the plague of the firstborn are again connected to this idea of the Red Sea and the drying up of the waters, and then the waters coming in to destroy those who try to cross later. So you have the waters drying up at the same time that this death and resurrection thing. Won't it be interesting? Won't it be interesting after actually understanding this when we're in heaven for 1,000 years, and then we see the whole Bible play out again right in front of us in terms of the conflict with the resurrection of the wicked and Satan playing this game, and we see the whole thing, and we'll go, "Wow, here it is again."
That's what I'm saying.